these very hardened routers which are going to be on the shop floor, which get information from the sensors. And that's what we manufacture, the hardened routers, the hardened switches, and the layer over that, which is the analytics part.
So actually, where I was coming from is, as you rightly said, but even prior to that, like, whenever we are putting sensors which are actually collecting the data, probably at the very onset, the kind of data that the sensors would be passing on, that would be pretty, low scale. I mean, it would be basically getting into, say, one typical example would be if someone is using a kind of, Arduino board, and they are passing on, capturing the data, and then eventually passing on to a Raspberry board, for example. Then probably the Raspberry board is something which might pass on the data to cloud, and that is where the routing and the concept comes in. But who is actually going to be looking after this stage where all the different sensors would come into the picture, they would be collecting data, because those are the ground tools, to be very honest, which will be doing the actual collection of the data. So who actually in India is looking after that part?
Let me see if I answered your question properly. What you meant was there's going to be a lot of voluminous data which will come from the various sensors. So how do you control what is required? Is that what your question was?
I'm trying to understand, how...
Keep your mic a little closer.
Yeah, what I was trying to say is how exactly, if the sensors are not in place, then eventual routing is not going to be of that much effect, because we are not getting the raw data from the ground. So who exactly, because all these sessions that we had since morning, so we were getting the perception that probably that sensors itself, there is a white spot. There is not too many companies which are playing there, and not too many companies who are providing or showing interest. There are talking about, people are talking about startups which are probably getting into that space, but where do we stand? If we don't really have too many companies getting into that zone, probably we will be stepping into IoT, but without having the raw ingredient which will actually give the data.
No, whether there's a huge opportunity there, the answer is yes. But Cisco is not in that space, but there will be lots of others who will come in building those sensors. And they're already doing that, because if you're expecting like 50 billion devices to be connected by 2020, I don't think we have adequate capacity to be building those sensors at the moment. That's what you're talking about, whether we are going to have that. Yeah, but that's not a field where we are going to be in, at least in the near future. Or there's something that I'm not privy to, but definitely sensors, because this is going to be fairly dumb equipment, right? It's not going to be intelligent. It's going to be just passing on the information. But the intelligence which is to be built is something we'll be working on. I hope that answers your question.
Yes. Just to add, there are companies actually like Honeywell, Schneider, Bosch and all, they are focused on very sensor technologies that are actually coming in place. Now if you see the wearables from a human point of view, actually the sensors that are going into the watches or your body and stuff like that is actually the sensor technology. So there is already a lot of companies focused on that. There are new chips coming with low power, low cost kind of setup that is coming in place. But technology is evolving actually, and I'm sure once that gets evolved, you need the basic infrastructure beyond that, which Cisco, Vodafone and others are going to provide that.
No. So absolutely valid question. That's why I started with the first thing, how smart is smart. So whether there is something which is a full-blown smart city, the way it is being done in, say, Barcelona, Nice or Songdo in Korea, the answer is no. But whether there are cities which have got elements of that, one of the very key elements is the safety and security. Navi Mumbai is a prime example of that. Jaipur now is recently going to be another city where the first module is in place. But whether there is a full-blown smart city, the answer is an absolute no. But whether there is an intent from the government to build lots of smart cities, you're all hearing about it, and I think that is eventually going to be a reality. Yeah, so as I said, you can't say smart city because it's got just one module. It is smarter than some of the other cities, but it is not a smart city. Yeah. But out the lot, yes, it is smart because it has already got. Sorry.
It just addresses one problem.
Yeah, just addresses. That's just the first step they have taken, because there are multiple steps.
You have also talked about the visionary ideas of the leaders actually. So, what vision we have regarding Jaipur, or can you throw some light on that?
What vision does Jaipur have?
Yeah, but do our leaders have on Jaipur?
Yeah. So, as I said, there are about 5 or 6 key modules for a smart city. And the first basic module, which is why I say basic, is because it's most critical, is the safety and security bit. Because today, safety and security has a direct correlation to almost everything, from economics to well-being to the quality of life, right? Today, if you are living in a city where safety and security is under threat, businesses don't want to function, people don't want to live. So that is where we say that is the most critical module, and that is the module currently which Jaipur is going ahead with. The implementation is on for that. So where there's going to be surveillance, there's going to be Wi-Fi. So that is the first module which works.
Sir, if I am wrong, if I am not wrong, what I understood that the sensor collects the information and send it back to the central server or somewhere else, correct?
No, not correct. Because if you do that, your servers are going to collapse big time.
Okay.
Because that is what is absolutely wrong. Because there are a lot of people who talk about IoT story like that. Because the moment you do that story, you're going to kill it. Because the kind of compute power that you'll require is going to be so huge that it is going to be absolutely not viable. So the idea is you have to build intelligence very close to the sensor, right on the shop floor, filter out the right information which is required, and then send it back to compute.
Okay. Now my question is, while sending the whatever the filtered data, sending to the central processing unit or somewhere else, is it support encryption or it is clear text communication?
No. So there is, it's plain routing which will happen. There is going to be encryption in that, for sure.
So there is encryption method is there.
There is, in fact, a different iOS version which has been developed for this from our side, which is what we call as IOX on this, which has got a different sort of encryption.
So Vodafone basically, as far as I know, is a telecom services company, right? That is their basic competency. How is it that they've evolved into so much of software and intelligence, etc.? It is a little away from their main business of telecom. How do you react?
I think Vodafone will be the best person to answer that question, but
I think that's the whole redefinition of the business model that I covered as part of my presentation. I think this is the whole hybrid model that we talked about, right? So all of those redefinition of business model is what we are looking at. So a tire manufacturer is also a service company now. So somebody like he is also getting into a service platform.
So if you see, actually telecom generally has been facing the heat from a mobility point of view, actually, because they didn't really went with the market needs. So they became, OTT players came in and started actually just taking the bandwidth. So it became a pipe provider. So now they are realizing that it's just not a pipe, it's just a value-added services that they can get it from the pipe as well. And then they want to play a bigger IoT story where they can actually give it as a service to either enterprise or consumer that they can consume it. So that's where the business model is changing.
Let me make another bold statement, because he says businesses are changing. Actually, and when I say AD1 of a new era, businesses are changing so much that in 5 years' time, every company will by and large be a technology company. Look at what's happening. Is Uber, somebody gave the example, is Uber a taxi company? No, it's a technology company. Today, if you go and ask Snapdeal and say, are you an e-com company? Are you an e-tailer? They say, no. We are an IT company. We're just a marketplace provider. These are all technology companies. And the future is changing. Is Amazon a bookstore? No. It's a technology company which is an enabler. So the future is going to be very, very different and very exciting. I think we're all very fortunate to be living in this era. As I said, next 5 years will be a very, very exciting 5 years for us. We all have to be technocrats. And that is where the other thing says is, if you're not technocrats, you'll be wiped out. 40% of the companies, huge organizations which exist today, will not exist in the next 10 to 20 years. And this has been the finding of all analysts across, whoever you read. Look at old organizations like a Sharp, Senio, where are they? We've all grown up hearing Sharp and Senio as huge brands. Are they there? No. And the worst is the next 10 years, you'll see some very large giants just disappear overnight. This phenomena was something which was unheard of, but it is going to happen now.
Question on Mr. Malik. Sir, you mentioned about the various components of a smart city. Yeah, various components of smart city. Safe city is being one of the components, safety and security, where we are talking about surveillance system and all. So, are there any fixed 4-5 components other than this other than surveillance system? Does waste management, parking, these all forms part of the smart city, or there are other 3-4 components which you could list out which could form the part of a smart city?
Yeah. No, I missed out a lot. Unfortunately, the presentation wasn't running. Otherwise, I would have taken you to. There are approximately 8 to 9 modules, right? Sorry. Yeah. So there can be 12 modules to 9 modules. Again, some modules are subset of the other module as well. You can, and some can even break it up further. Okay, but whatever touches you in a city, that itself is a module. You need utility, so utility is a module. Water, whatever, that's a module. You need traffic, that's a module. Parking, which is a subset of traffic in a way, it can be taken as a separate module. So, depends upon security, safety, lighting. Now, lighting is also related to security now. Why? Because all the street lights now are going to be with inbuilt infrared sensors and CCTV cameras. So typically what will happen if the street is dark and your vehicle approaches or somebody approaches, it will automatically light up, right? So typically what you've done is you've saved energy, because energy is one big module. It's safety and security, because immediately, and if it's those hours which are like where there's no patrolling, the camera will automatically start using video analytics to see whether there is something which is untoward happening there, and immediately probably connect with your police station. Yeah? Sorry.
Okay. Yeah.
Whether they are
No,
9, whether
no,
they are
because you
12,
see, number
it
of-
really doesn't make sense, right? So there are basically 3 areas the smart city draft policy explains in terms of economic attractiveness, sustainability, and the quality of life, right? So 3. And these 3 can be further broken down into sub-themes. But please understand, not all cities are the same, right? Jaipur is not Calcutta and Calcutta is not Hyderabad, right? For every city, there would be some things like which Amit mentioned, whether it is solid waste management. For some city, it could be safety and security. For some cities, it could be the basic city administration system. Most of our cities have not got the basic fundamental systems right. And then we are talking about smart waste management, we are talking smart grids, we are talking smart parking, and how do you integrate all of this together? On what platform? So you need to have a foundation, right? So it's not about modules, it's about what that city wants. In the policy, it clearly states that every city is to come out with a city development plan. And I think currently it's New Kolkata Development Authority here in India who's probably on that stage of inflection where they're creating one. But then you need to understand, what does NKDA want? I mean, you want lots of people to go in and settle there. You want to use that as a business hub. You want to use that as an IT hub. So for each and every use case, the themes vary. Okay? And after the city development plan is made, and there the consultants will come in and decide what's right for the city. And whether it's safety and security first, or solid management, waste management first, or command and control first, will be decided based upon the city's ability, appetite, risk vulnerability. There's so many factors. So there's no specific, panacea for all ills kind of a architecture that's there. There's been tremendous amount of work done on this subject by, let's say, Cisco, let's say IBM. We at SAP, we've been working with cities for the last 30 years, surreptitiously, building their foundations. And we are moving on to, areas such as solid waste management, smart grids. But there are areas where, a lot of us come in and collaborate. Not every vendor can do everything, and smart city is just not safe city and smart parking, because that's how the agenda is getting hijacked. But then that's where we need to understand that every city is different, and every city has to maintain its heritage, its history, its culture, And there are other parameters, including the quality of life, which has to be taken care of. I mean, depending upon that, I think the modules should evolve.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think this should be the last question, if I can.
Just want to know what is the preparedness for the country vis-a-vis the rural part of India. How prepared are we to digitize? Are we talking about smart villages? Are we talking of empowering people? What are the thought leaders talking about it?
I'll take this. Yeah, so there is definitely, so you also know that one of the key elements, the foundation of this is actually the fiber, right? And because that is where the connectivity parts come in. You can't make anything smarter till you have the connectivity. And the first thing which this government is currently doing is that the national broadband as well as the NOFN project, where the optical fiber is going to connect all the panchayat levels, etc. Now once that is done, then whether you talk about a smart village, etc., that becomes a fairly a real thing, because you can definitely run a lot of modules there. But whether that is right now being discussed, maybe no, not as the first step. First step is pure connectivity for rural and smartness for urban area. Because I think that's the right thing to do as well, because there is a lot of work to be done, because you have to prioritize some of these activities. So whether smart village is currently being talked about, no, conceptually yes, but not at least from whatever I have heard of the government. They are talking more about connectivity, and I think that's the right way to go at the moment.
Any clarifications? Fine. Thank you very much. I thank all the speakers for having a lively session, even though we had to restrict the speaking time for the lack of, because we were running short of time. I now leave it to you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, everybody on the dais. I would now request my colleague Shankalpita to come and present memento, to hand it over to Mr. Radhakrishnan. And sir, please present the memento to Mr. Saurav Mukherjee. To Mr. Sandeep Agarwal. To Mr. Shubhrata Dash. And also to Mr. Amit Malik. I would request Mr. Sen to come up on stage and present the memento to Mr. Radhakrishnan. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, participants. It was a very interactive session, although the crowd was very thin but very interactive. Thank you, everybody.